dia, buenos días, good morning, bonjour and bon dia. Gracias a todos por estar hoy aquí, los que estáis presencialmente.
Thanks to everyone for joining us here today. Those of us who have joined us here in the Canodrome, which is the Center for Digital Innovation and Democracy. This is a unique place here in Barcelona. I see some of you have had the opportunity to visit it. And we're really pleased that they've agreed to be the venue for today's event. So I'm also going to say hello to all those of you joining us online on Zoom from different parts of the world. My name is Marta Ballesta, and it's a great pleasure for me to be your host today. This is being held in celebration of the International Day of the Educating City, which is on November 30th of every year, as you know. Now, we brought it forward by a few days because we wanted to share this event internationally. We wanted to be sure that we could celebrate it today so that you could all celebrate it on the day proper on the 30th of November. So welcome to everybody who's taking part in this International Day, where it's an event that's bringing together authorities, institutions, municipal experts, teachers, students, children, multipliers of participation and education. Now, this day is the result of a lot of hard work and time and people putting effort into it, from the Directorate for Education, Children, and Participation of the International Association of Educating Cities of the City of Barcelona, as well, of course, with the IACE. Today, we have participation of a number of cities from this international network, which brings together some 500 cities from around the world. So later this morning, we'll be hearing from some of these cities about their experience. Also, it's an international event, so there will be interpreting provided in the official languages of the IACE. That's Spanish, English, French, and Portuguese. So my thanks in advance to the interpreters for allowing us to expand our reach out to everybody who's sharing this event today. Especially for those of you joining us on Zoom, please do remember you've got an icon at the bottom of the screen. It's a little globe that you can use in order to select the language that you want to listen to. Now this year, I'm sure you know, the motto of the International Day of the Educating City is Children's Participation in the Educating City. Now the commitment of our cities, also the right to educating cities, and the fact that we are at the service of our citizens is one of the three main blocks of the Charter of Educating Cities. There are articles such as Article 8, which refers to governance and citizen participation. Now, over the course of today, we'll have the opportunity to get to know each other, to see how we foster this type of participation across cities and create enriching experiences. And we also think it's important to have this dialogue with the general public, to hear what you have to think, what you want to say, your doubts, challenges, and of course, success stories. So I'll leave it at that for now. But do know that there are social media, we're being active, feel free to share it using our hashtag. And with that, I think we can officially launch this with some introductory remarks by Marina Canaz, who's the Secretary General of the International Association of Educating Cities. With a microphone, please, for the speaker. With a microphone, please, for the speaker. Microphone, please. Thank you. So I'd like to welcome all of you who are joining us both here in the room and also many of you in Zoom. We're celebrating this day, this International Day of Educating Cities. It's an event that we're organizing together with the City Council of Barcelona, which is meant to renew our commitment to education and the rights of children, and to build cities that are more participatory, more educating, and more committed to children. As Marta said, Principle 8 or Article 8 of the Charter of Educating Cities says very clearly that children, boys and girls, and young people are active citizens with a right to have an opinion, to be heard, and to participate in the decisions that affect them. So, they shouldn't just be the recipients of services, but rather active players in building their future. Active citizens who are critical and participatory and democratic is not something that is improvised or is simply automatically created when you become an adult. Rather, this is something you learn bit by bit through concrete experiences. In order to achieve that, it's important to create the necessary conditions so that boys, girls, and teenagers will learn to participate in society from the earliest of ages. But it's also important that adults change how we look at children and think about children's participation in the city. Now, I'm convinced that many of us here today would agree that their proposals will enrich municipal decisions. They have a new outlook and they'll bring a new energy. Children, in participating in the life of a city, learn how democracy works from their immediate environment, from their schools, their neighborhoods, and more. They learn to integrate concepts such as justice, equality, responsibility, which are the basis of a democratic society. But it's more than that. Participation in city matters helps children learn how to express themselves, to transmit their ideas, and strengthens their self-esteem, helps them become more autonomous and more confident in themselves. Participating in decision-making, even if they're small, allows them to learn the value of dialogue, listening, and respect for other views, and it helps them develop social skills. When we feel that our voices count, we develop a stronger link with our community, and we learn that our actions have an impact, and it strengthens our sense of belonging. The value of children's participation, of boys, girls, and teenagers being involved in society, all of the members of the network of educating cities are committed to creating spaces and mechanisms for child participation, recognizing their voice as something that's essential, listening to their proposals for how to make things better, how to transform the city. And we commit to creating spaces and opportunities to provide information so that they could develop social skills, learn what their rights are, and how to defend and improve them. We commit to fostering opportunities for children and by children, and also promoting self-sufficiency for young people, including vulnerable populations is also one of the commitments of the Educating Cities. It allows us to create cities that are more inclusive and more equitable. We commit to promoting intergenerational dialogue in order to create cohesive communities with solidarity. We want to strengthen links between institutions, such as what we're doing today, with social partners, with schools, with families, in order to foster well-being and active citizenship. And I will take this opportunity to encourage you all, everyone here, and those who are following us online on Zoom, to listen to children more, to ask them about the things that concern them. For instance, designing of play areas, parks, playgrounds, and other spaces, urban services, the use of screen time, how to create cities that are more sustainable, listening to their proposals and their ideas. Also, cultural and leisure activities in your cities. So with this 10th edition of the International Day of the Educating City, we would reaffirm that children are not just the future of our city, but also the present. Listen to their voices. Give them an opportunity to participate in decision-making. That is democracy. We will create spaces in our cities where every boy and girl can freely participate and feel like an active part in a community that learns and transforms with them. Only in this way can we build together cities that are truly educating cities, that are inclusive and committed with the rights of children. Thank you very much, and I very much look forward to today's events, and I hope you enjoy them. Thank you very much, Marina, for those introductory remarks. Food for thought, I think, which focuses well on some of the things that I'm sure are going to be coming up over the course of today's discussions. The importance of ensuring that children participate in the development of our cities in our present, but also in our future. Now, these are very relevant comments, which allow us to launch today's event with our first keynote speaker. It's a great pleasure for us to welcome Cath Larkins here today. I'm sure many of you, most of you will be familiar with you. She's an expert in child participation. She's a professor of the University of Lancashire in the UK. She's co-director of the Centre for Children's and Young People's Participation. She was a pioneer in research with these groups, thinking about co-production with children and young people, with a very clear and specific idea of fighting against discrimination, against inequality, also through influencing in public policy. She's published a lot of works. I can just highlight a few. One in particular is the Council of Europe's Handbook on Children's Participation, which can be downloaded online and which I would encourage you to consult. So thank you very much, Cath, for joining us here today. We look forward to hearing what you have to say, and then we'll start our dialogue. You have the floor.
Bonjour. I used to speak Spanish, and I am very sorry that I am speaking to you in English today. But I hope that the translation is working for everybody. And I hope you can see my slides. That looks good. Okay, so I'm going to start by saying that I am very grateful to be here. For many years I've been coming to Barcelona to learn from people who are working here. And today I think is an opportunity to give back to you some of the ideas that I have learned from other people. As a university professor, my job is to listen to other people mostly, and to draw those ideas together and to maybe find some themes that will help other people reflect on their work and their practice. And that's what I'll be presenting to you today. If the translation is working for you, can you put your thumbs up? Okay, that's a good start. So I think we're all here because we care about children, and we care about the future of the planet. We care about making a fairer world. And I think participation with children and young people is a key to that process. Together, we are going to make better presents and better futures for all of us. And to do that, we need to learn some things, and we learn well together. I learn from children. Is there anyone in this room who has learned something from children? Would you put your hand up? And there are more hands. You know, we learn. And I'm sorry for the people online, I can't see your hands, but I imagine them in the air. Because I think we all learn from children in many ways. Do you hear me now? Any better? Do you hear me now? I hear me now. Okay, so I will talk like this, and it will be easier for everybody. Okay. Thank you for pointing that out.
You can use this.
I will. Oh, look.
Wait.
How is this? If I keep talking, it will suddenly work really well for everybody. That's good. Okay. Now I feel like I have to talk like somebody really projecting in a microphone. And it reminds me of the days when I used to be a DJ. So apologies if I start making music. But you know, I was saying, there are so many things that we learn from children. The photo that hopefully will appear any moment now. If this works.
not working.
It's not working. Okay. So I will turn behind me every time that I want it to change. Yeah. Okay. Now it works. Okay. So we are in this innovation and digital hub. We're talking about democracy, but still sometimes the digital tools take some time, you know. But it's the human interactions that really matter, I think, whether they are happening online through the camera or they're happening here in space. And one human interaction I want to draw your attention to is this one. The baby who, in my family this week, you know, taught their mother something. The baby taught their mother that what they actually needed was a toy. And the mother learnt that by really looking hard into the eyes of the child and the child conveying some sense of meaning. Children, even when they're infants, teach us things. And sometimes they teach us that older generations were wrong. You know, the grandmother was saying, oh, no, they need to be put outside, ignore them, you know. But no, what they needed was a toy, and the child was telling them. The other thing I learned from children this week, and these relate to the pictures on the right of the screen, was that when a disaster happens in a community, as happened in the town where I used to call home, in Monmouth in Wales, when a disaster happens, like last week, and the river burst its bank and the ground was flooded, it was children with their cameras who were telling us all about where the water was and where the danger was. So children in all sorts of situations, the best and the worst, know things that we need to learn from. And I think that's why we're all here. So, I think we don't just learn from children. I think we also learn from each other. And sometimes we learn to do difficult things. It's really interesting that you've asked me to come and talk to you about participation. And actually, in this room, you all know a lot about what you're doing. You know a lot about what works and what the challenges are. And I hope that in the discussions today, we'll get a chance to draw that out from each other. But I'm really interested in how you introduced earlier this idea that children are citizens. You know? And children are educating us through their words and their actions. They're telling us what works and what doesn't work, not just in our families, not just in disasters, but when they're engaged in services, when they're engaged in communities. They show us by the things that they don't show up to, you know, and the things that they keep coming back to. And sometimes that happens in participation projects. Sometimes it's really difficult to create the spaces that people want to come to. And we can learn by thinking about what's difficult from that and learn from the people who found that they have answers to that. So that's the general background in terms of my ambition of what we'll do today. But also there's backgrounds in international policy and law. You know, I think most of the people in this room will know about the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the different articles that promote children's participation. But there's also the general comment that the UN have written. And they describe participation as an ongoing process. And I think it's really important for us to think about this ongoing process. Participation is not just a one-off event. It's those relationships, it's the ongoing action. It's not just about creating the space for children to come into. It's about collective action, often over years, to bring about the changes that they want. And that happens through relationships. The image that you see here is a group of children in Ireland. They created this image with a cartoonist, you know, talking to Senator Joe, who is in their national parliament. And they created that image because they know him well, and they knew that he would be happy enough to be characterized in that way. It's those kind of relationships that start to enable change. They and other children help me create these images too. And I think these reflect their ambitions to not just participate in what's happening in school, but also very much participate and change things in the community, in their relationships with the police, in their relationships with health services, in the provision of food and leisure activities. And I'm very grateful to a group of children in Barcelona who helped create the images on the right of this image. So together, we know that every aspect of city life touches on children, but children also touch on it, because in all of those spaces, as citizens, they are already contributing. They don't just need to learn. They need to be given the space to teach us, and we need to attend to them really carefully. And to do that, when sometimes it's been difficult, I found it useful to go back to these things that are in law, like the UN General Comment on children's right to participate. And it sets out these 9 basic principles of how we should do it. We should be transparent about what we can and can't do. We should be informative. It's a choice, so children may not want to turn up. We should be respectful, it should be relevant to them, should be child-friendly, inclusive, supported by training for them and for us, safe and sensitive to risk, and accountable. Okay, so that's the background. Let's move on to the process, because there's something about this idea of it being a rolling process that is sometimes really hard to explain. And working with groups of children here in Barcelona and in 9 other countries, we developed this model for how we think about, well, what is it that we do? And this is the model that is at the heart of the Council of Europe Handbook on Children's Participation. So I don't know, does anybody think this reflects their process? Do you start by planning? Is it really nice and simple? Because the thing is, in my experience, it's actually not all that simple. This is a way of representing a mess and trying to make it look like something that other people can do. So let's explore the mess a little bit together. In practice, I think it looks, much more like, okay, we're working together in different parts of this model, and we know that we have to start by planning and preparing. And planning and preparing means knowing our communities, but it also means knowing our children, knowing who we're going to reach out to and where we're going to reach out to them. And if you start to do that and have that connection, then things start to flow. The next thing that often happens is that we come into a participatory process and we've identified an issue that we want to work with children on. But actually that can be quite exclusive, because they may not want to work on the idea that you presented. So if we can involve children in identifying issues and prioritizing them, then we're much more likely to be creating an inclusive process. And then, you might have engaged with some children really well to start this process, but the likelihood is that that's a small handful of children, and they are usually the ones who turn up and do these things anyway. So your interest, if you're interested in participation as a form of democracy, is about reaching out. So one of the wonderful things that children are good at is telling you how to reach out to others and to investigate the views of other children who are not in the room. With children, we spent a long time deciding on what is the right word to use here. Is it research? Is it consult? But they said investigate, because sometimes that's like being a detective. Sometimes you have to go in a place and think about it and see what children are communicating. Other times you might do an interview. Sometimes you might do a survey, but you can investigate in a million different ways. And sometimes when you're starting to investigate, you can start to think, what are the actions then that we have to plan to respond to the problems that we're hearing? And you might start to work on that. I can't see, what's on the screen over there, but I think you're starting to see that action might happen at different times. It's not quite like that circle that we first drew. And you might start feeding back to children already about the actions that you've taken while you've still got other action to carry on with. Because one of the things that's really problematic in participatory processes is that we think of them as a 6-week intervention or 10-week intervention. But I don't know, have any of you ever tried to change anything in the world? Did it happen in 6 weeks? No, I've been doing this job, a long time, and things do change, 30 years, and things have changed in that time. Sometimes things change really quickly, and sometimes, I've seen it in my work with care experienced children, sometimes it takes a movement to build that over years, and then the change happens. So we need to allow ourselves that, and we need to help children understand that and involve them in the process of continuing to take action. Continuing to take action like that, and more action, and more feedback, because it's by that rolling process that really we build a movement for change. And it's also by learning from each other and kind of reflecting on what we're doing, because I put it at the end, but actually it happens all the way through, What are we learning? What can we share with each other? What does the wonderful community of people in this room already know? And what can we tell each other about what needs to happen? So that's why we designed the process like this, because it helps us reflect, it helps us think long term, it helps us reach out to other people, and it helps us keep that momentum for change carrying on. The other thing that I think is really useful to think about, if this will fly, is these are my nieces, and on my 50th birthday, they tried to teach me how to float, and they gave me their permission to share this. I didn't learn, but I am constantly learning to try to learn how to float over the challenges. And when I ask people about in the planning for this event about the challenges people are facing, these are some of the things that you mentioned. There's a lack of resources. It's really difficult to engage with children in different circumstances. Timescales are tight, evaluation and feedback. There are all of these things. Training and coordination. We need to know how to do all of that, and we don't actually know how to float. But we can learn from each other how to do and try to do some of those things. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the things that I've learned from different people about how to respond and how to try to float. Okay. So lack of resources. I don't know what your community is like, but in mine the safe is fairly empty. There's no money in it. But the picture in the middle was created by children, and it says, children have, rights to be involved and be part of the change. So we have to do it anyway. We have to find ways of doing it. And during times of COVID, which is the third picture, but some people were finding ways of doing it, even when the situation was really difficult. So I think all we can do is be honest about the resources that we have, and try to get more of them. We can focus on the small steps of change that we can achieve with the resources that are available. And we can build belief and understanding that this is a process that is of value. And sometimes we need to do real work around that in our municipalities. Sometimes we need to do a lot of work with the people who maybe could put a bit of money in the safe, and pull it out and give it to us. So I think that sort of shows us what's wrong with the model, because also, and this is what we added in to the handbook from the Council of Europe is actually everything in the background of that. The creating the participatory environments, that is vitally important. And, that's about ensuring there's ownership at the highest level for what it is that you're doing, that you've got support for that, that they're willing to invest in staff capacity, that there are ways actually of children getting into dialogue and making complaints about things, and that there's a sense that the municipality itself will monitor the process in ways that are agreed with the communities that you're working with. And I'll come back to that a bit later. Okay, so imagine we're trying to create these participatory environments as well as do all the things in this process. Well, I'm surprised any of you are in the room because that is so much work to do, and it keeps us busy all the time, and it's very demanding. And my congratulations to all of you for being part of the process. But we do it because sometimes there are beautiful moments. And this was one beautiful moment. Because it's about relationship building, and it's also about Roma girls in a cafe. I worked with a community group that involved Roma health mediators. And they'd been working with a group of girls for a long time, and they wanted to get their ideas about how to improve the community. They found it difficult to engage with the girls to start off with because they had so many different things going on in their lives. But what they decided to do, because the girls told them, was to go to a cafe and chat. So once a week, they started going to a cafe and having a conversation. And they brought into that space the things the girls were interested in. They told them about International Women's Day. They talked about other cultures. They talked about travel. And the girls started to imagine some of the things that they want to exchange. And they decided they would go to a local church and use the church hall and start a cooking class. And they exchanged ideas between each other about cooking. And then they invited the mayor to come and eat some food with them. And then the mayor decided that he would give them some funding to go and see what it was like to travel to the beach, which was something that they wanted to do for a very long time. And then he asked them, can you tell me about what could improve in this community? And so through that relationship building, through their investment, and particularly from somebody within the community building those relationships and following the process that those children wanted, suddenly there was a dialogue happening. And those girls also took part in a national consultation on education policy because they completed a questionnaire that had been created by another group. So my thought is this is a good way of thinking about inclusion. Because, if we can learn from communities themselves about how to be inclusive, if we can build trust with them, then we've got a chance to reach out to everybody. And that means being brave enough to name the really massive structural inequalities. And it means municipalities being brave enough to hear that and choose to respond to it. It doesn't mean, I didn't actually ever go and meet those girls. I worked with the Roma educators online, and they decided how to do it, and they reflected together on how to do it. And actually, I learned from them about what's possible, and I think that's really useful for us to think about. Sometimes, all sorts of artistic engagement, sort of really engaging ways of enabling a voice are really important as well. So I'm not denying that, and hopefully we'll hear a lot about that from other people. But I'm conscious of time and won't continue on that. But, more than anything, build trust and learn from communities. Because this helps us focus on inclusion. And I think it's particularly important in these first stages where you're setting priorities. If you go in and ask about something that nobody's interested in, it's not actually going to go anywhere very much. But also listen to communities when you're trying to reach out to others. How am I doing for time? Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to, I never know where to push this and what to point at. I try pointing there and I'm trying to point under here. I think it's working underneath. 5 minutes. Yeah, okay. So let's touch on a few different things. Timescales. Yeah. So who can float over that challenge? You know, that is really difficult, and time matters in terms of how much time you've got working with a group, but also when the municipality says we're going to make a decision in 3 months' time, and you know that is not at all possible to organise the relationships you need to do to get that. So again, it's about this participatory environment in the background that's important. But I was really struck today when we walked around this building. Some of us were told about the community radio that's happening here. And children involved in that are talking about the things that are important to them. And I think one of the things that can help us deal with a lack of timescales is to create somewhere like a bank or a library, online library, of the things that children care about and the things that they're saying, so that when we need ideas from children, their responses in a quick turnaround, they're already available somewhere. And with the technology in this building, I know that we can create a closed AI system that would enable us to pick out of that anything that was on the relevant themes that children are talking about. So, you know, if there's one thing we can do to deal with short timescales, it's to bank all of the knowledge that we have from children already in a place that we can all access. And then in those short timescales, focus on the people who are missing, you know. So it may not mean talking to a lot of people, but focus on hearing from the children who are going to be most poorly affected by something, you know, and who haven't been heard. And if possible, this next slide is a bit of theory. If possible, get them into a position where they are corporate agents. Yeah. So this is a theory for thinking about how children have power. They have power in what they choose to do in their everyday lives. They have power in the roles that they choose for themselves as carers or as members of the community. Sometimes they have power in dealing with the adversities that life throws at them. But every now and then, children can take a step into the place of decision-making with access to resources. And if you can get children into those places, then they're really starting to set the agenda, especially if they can pull people to account. But only if they've done the investigation of everyone else's views as well, you know? So we're thinking about this ongoing flowing process between all of that. Okay, so to do that, what needs to happen? Well, we need to learn, you know, and we need training and coordination, because no one person here can do it on their own, you know. So the training that I've found really effective is where children deliver it, but also where reflective practice, you know, when people are immersed in situations. So the policymaker who has to come and work with a group of children and see their power suddenly understands things they've never understood before, you know. But also practice learning, and I know in different parts of Europe at the moment, there's lots of practice learning sets that are being set up, where people doing participation, especially with marginalised communities, are learning from each other about that process. Because it's only by reflecting with communities that you understand how to work with them, you know. And community members can deliver training to you as well on how to work with them. And the last dots on the right are about a strategy, you know, because none of this happens unless you've got a plan for how it's happened. And there are great resources in Ireland. They've done a national strategy. I know you've done work here. There's advice on how to make it happen by joining up your thinking. So where does this get us? Oh, down here. You know, if I could pick on one thing that I would want to focus the learning on, it's policymakers, you know, so that they learn about the timescales that are necessary, and they learn about how to respond, and you know, not only by taking action, but by feeding back about what's not possible. You know. And finally, the challenge that's about evaluation, feedback, and limits. Because, you know, that's why they need training, isn't it? Policymakers need training because they need to understand that you can't engage in a process which is designed to enhance democracy unless you're telling children what you've done with their ideas, you know, or you've explained to them what's not possible. So there are various evaluation processes. One on the left here is called the Child Participation Assessment Tool, which generally happens at a national level, but children have designed a way of that happening just in schools. So you can go around with 10 questions and say, is this a participatory environment? You know. By training people how to give feedback, you can actually really help policymakers by giving them, and we've done that really successfully by saying, okay, they're at a loss. You know, some of those who are really willing, they want to do things, but they know they can't do everything. So sometimes we've used like a traffic light system, you know, and said you can respond to really clear points from children and just say, okay, this is green light, this is orange, because we can do it if we get the resources, or we can do it later in time. And this one, red, we just won't be able to do. You know. But also, it's about preparing children for the limits of that process. And the picture on the right is this idea of low-hanging fruit. Because children know things, as I started by saying, you know, and they know some things are hard, and they know that the fruit at the top of the tree is really hard to get to, and they might need to create some kind of special tool to get there. You know. But they can be actively making choices about whether they're going to try to create change, which is just about how their group works, or whether they want to make change in the whole policy for everything that's happening in Barcelona. I'm going to skip the next slide and come back to it. But, you know, this was about children just learning from each other about what those different fruits on a tree might look like, you know, and how to target their action at different levels. Because I know I'm conscious of time, and I'm trying to get this to move forward. There we are. Okay, so we come back. What have we learned? You know, I think we've learned about inclusion. I think we've learned about a culture of participation. I think we've learned that there are ways of, you know, making that connection and making it work. You know, if we do this thing of involving children in creating priorities rather than just setting our own priorities, we'll engage with them all, and they'll stay connected longer. You know? If we start by investigating with other children and taking action straight away, we can build the momentum for change. If we feedback, it'll encourage them to stay part of it. If we do all of that really well, then we'll get to that position where children are taking their ideas to the people who've got the power to make it. And when the children drew this was Donald Tusk that they drew. And it does happen, you know. What you're doing works. And I think that was the final message that I wanted to end on. That for when we did the survey of people to understand what the challenge is that you need to float over, the good thing was that we heard nearly half of people find it is easy to do this. You know, it is possible to do this. So we don't need to think this is an impossible dream. It's not a myth. It is a reality. And where we're struggling, we can just learn from each other to think about how do we put these bits of the process together. So I'm looking forward to us now learning from the wonderful examples that we've got from other countries to see how this process has happened. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Now let's sit down. Thanks for these very articulate reflections, designing all this process, strengths and weaknesses. And now we shall hear specific experiences in 3 cities that belong to the global network, the International Association of Educating Cities. We have a representative from Turin, Geneva, and Rivas Vaciamadrid. Can you please come up here to the scenario, to the stage? Fausto, Isabel.
Isabel, si puedes aquí, quizá mejor, que así tenemos a Cath en un extremo. Perfecto, bueno, habéis podido...
Here, best because we've got Cath at one end. Yes, I'm sure you have listened to what Cath Larkins has said. Now we'll hear experiences from the cities, from the association. We're a bit behind time, so we're going to have to be fairly strict with timekeeping. First of all, we'll hear from Fausto, from Turin, and last will be Lorena. So we'll be able to hear specific experiences developed in the city, and then we'll have comments, and hopefully there will be time for a conversation amongst all. Fausto, please, you go ahead.
Okay.
I shall be speaking in Spanish. Youth participation policies in the Department of Educational Services, City of Torino. So the Municipal Council of Girls and Boys is a structure to cater for political organized participation designed to help students and pupils to understand the functioning of public institutions and local political bodies. Now, the program is aimed at young people from between 10 and 14 years of age who are carrying out primary and secondary studies in Turin. And this offers them their first significant experience of democracy and citizens' participation. In such a manner, this municipal council is seen as a school for citizenship, establishing direct contact both with municipal institutions and with social communities and spaces which are close to where they live, close to their schools, and it's a new, if you like, reference point in their neighborhood. Amongst discussions, the subjects under discussion include rights, inclusiveness, respect for the environment, and the importance of sustainable practices, active citizenship, right to education, volunteering, the right to health, the being aware of the proper use of new technologies, and the right to free expression. This Municipal Council for Boys and Girls represents a school of citizenship and an educational experience on the subjects which municipal committees deal with, which can be summarized here, but not in some of them are listed here, such as the rights to inclusiveness, respect for the territory, environment, promoting best sustainable practices, active citizenship via volunteering, the right to education, right to health, and so on. Not an exclusive list by any means.
We can see the Assessora Salerno on the right.
We can hear the on the right Salerno.
Bandana, okay. La Alcade, Lili,
the mayor of the Boys and Girls in the Municipal Council. That's in the photograph. A girl, a second generation girl, says the speaker.
We can see video with Lily.
This allows young people to dwell upon these subjects, allows them to express their opinions and formulate what have been known as recommendations, like sort of motions, which are then sent up to the Municipal Council of Adults in a joint session, and when it's possible, they are approved or voted upon. The project has different phases: registering the schools which are interested in this process, a debate on the project, selecting students for the council and elections, establishing the municipal committee and their working groups, monthly meetings of this council, and participating in planned actions, feedback and exchange with students of the participating schools, and at the end there's a final meeting at the city council and feedback on work carried out. Now, the process which led to the effective implementation of the Girls and Boys Council involved the participation of 8 schools and 30 pupils in the first year. It's of experimental nature, right? With the continuing cooperation of the participating schools, with the help of the management, school management, and the teaching faculty, who made themselves available to accompany the children in the, if you like, the roadmap designed by the City Council. The initiative had so much success that in the second edition, 2024-2025, 30 schools participated and 90 students, turning these Girls and Boys Council in Turin in the biggest one in the Piemonte region. Furthermore, it offered the possibility of an external participation, thanks to the setting up of a Padlet.
This is a link for
accessible to all, but managed by the facilitators of the Municipal Council, where we can follow the work, see videos, and read about the activities of this Girls and Boys Council in Turin. Right now, we're looking at how to draw up this Girls and Boys Council for the 2025-2026 year. And we hope that it'll also meet with success. As I said, work in progress. Hopefully as successful as last year, the speaker says.
This is newspaper articles.
The speaker is in English.
Le proposte fatte ai ragazzi raccolte dal Consiglio Comunale Adulti.
Proposals made by the students and taken up on in the City Council.
Cresciuta in Barriera di Milano, si chiama Loja Inamer, 12 anni, per tutti Lili, egiziana, cittadina italiana, cresciuta in Barriera di Milano, sogna da grande di diventare medico. È la nuova sindaca dei ragazzi di Torino. Come ci si sente da sindaco?
È una bellissima esperienza, è la prima volta che sperimento una cosa del genere. È bellissimo avere questo senso di responsabilità.
The video will not be interpreting as it is in Italian, which is not one of the languages of our meeting.
Soltanto le mie idee, però ascolterò tutti.
Questo è il momento della sua elezione a Palazzo Civico davanti agli oltre 90 coetanei di 31 scuole torinesi.
Che cosa hai detto per convincere i tuoi compagni a votarti?
Ho Ho parlato dei problemi della nostra città, che cosa voglio migliorare e quali sono i miei obiettivi. Soprattutto nelle scuole, che ci sono diverse risorse, diversi servizi e molte scuole ne hanno di meno. Quindi il mio primo obiettivo è questo.
Ora inizia il lavoro diviso come il Consiglio Comunale dei Grandi in commissioni. I temi arrivano spesso dalla vita quotidiana.
Io sono di origine egiziana, ma sono cittadina italiana, ma molti miei compagni non hanno la cittadinanza e questo è per loro un problema perché, ad esempio, noi dobbiamo andare in gita a Strasburgo, al Parlamento Europeo, e molti miei compagni non riusciranno probabilmente ad andare perché non hanno la cittadinanza.
Impegno sociale ed educazione civica e poi un sogno. Il tuo futuro come lo vedi? Cosa sogni?
Io vorrei essere una dottoressa, magari una cardiologa.
Pues muchas gracias, Fausto. Muy interesante esta experiencia.
Thank you much, Fausta. Very interesting experience that your council has had. Cath, I don't know if you want to make a quick comment and then we'll hear from Isabel.
Don't worry.
Now, Grace.
It's okay.
It works. Thank you so much for sharing that example with us. One of the things that strikes me is that you're able to reach out to a lot of children through working through the schools. I can help you. The thing is, if I turn this way, I bring my shirt with me and I look at you. Apologies. So you were able to connect with a lot of children, and one of the challenges in schools councils is to engage with all children and a diversity of children. I wonder if you can tell us how they chose each other to be part of the process.
Spagnolo la domanda? Ok, così capisco meglio. Ok,
¿De acuerdo?
ok.
Sí.
No, puedo decir en español.
Sí, ok, puedes repetir. La diversidad.
Perhaps you could repeat it. So I wanted to know how you chose the boys and girls to be involved. So how we chose them, okay.
De escolas si iscrivono per partecipare. E in ogni escolas
The speaker speaking Italian.
vengono decisi, si propongono dei candidati che vengono votati, due per ogni scuola.
So two
children for school, and il Consiglio Comunale de Niños y Niñas è la somma.
This council of boys and girls is the sum of 2 children per school.
Niños for school, for 30 school, 35, 36 school, etc. Ok? Escolas iscritta e elecciones in each school. Okay.
So we're seeing the beginning of a.
And the candidates elect the alcalde.
The councillors. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing the beginning of a democratic process. And it's interesting to then think, okay, they are being asked to make proposals. So they are, if you think about the model that I suggested, they are making proposals for the issues that are important to them. So can you tell us about some of the issues and the proposals that they made? What were the subjects of those proposals? What did these children want to change?
Can you repeat in español?
¿Qué tipo de temas? Sí. ¿Qué tipo de temas tratan?
What type of subjects did the children want to change? What was important to the children?
The same themes of Council for Adult. Okay. Ambient, development, la ciudad del niños e niñas, scuola.
The city of children, school, mobility.
In fact, the children propose raccolta differenziata no? in the park.
Okay.
Do not exist in Turin, in the park. In the house, sì, in the home, yes, ma in the park no. E il Consiglio Adulti ha recepito this issue and work in progress for this action.
Okay.
Si te parece, Cath, así hemos hecho este par de
Cath,
preguntas. Vamos a escuchar a Isabel.
perhaps now we've had a few questions. Maybe we'll hear from Isabel next, and then we'll continue with more questions, and we'll also open it up to the audience. In any case, Fausto, we see that you're reproducing at the children's level what the adults are doing, making it more participatory. And you see that it's the adults who end up incorporating something that the children suggested that the children didn't have. So that's very interesting. So now we'll hear from Isabel talking to us about Geneva and their experience there.
Sí, disculpad un poco la complejidad técnica, pero como son
Sorry, this is technically very complex. There's lots of different microphones. We have the interpreters, we've got the streaming, and so we need to combine the microphones. So when you're speaking, you need to push a button so that it goes green, and then when you stop, it needs to be turned off so that we don't have the different microphones open at once. Can you hear me? Asks Isabel, can you hear me? Sorry, I don't speak Spanish. I hope you can understand me. I won't be speaking to no one, just speaking French. Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be able to exchange views with you. Let me just start by telling you where I come from, where I'm speaking from. And now it's my time to start fighting with the technology. Let's see. I want to show you where I come from, a small town in a small country, Geneva. Now, am I showing you this picture? You can see we're in a town that is a border town. It's an enclave surrounded by a border. So it's a particular urban situation that you'll find. There's no room for anything. The city has to develop on limited land. You almost need to build a city within a city. So you really need to ask, where's the place for children in this city as we grow? And it's important to think about it from that standpoint, just so we understand the history of our participation. So, numbers-wise, participation of children started back in 2003 when we were invited to Porto Alegre. That was the World Social Forum at the time. And our mayor came back with this whole concept of participatory budgets. And so we had a budget that could be used in schools to work together with children about child participation. And this really was a new thing, to bring all of the stakeholders together, including children, and to plan a project together. Then we had a whole process with UNICEF. Let's see. We're trying, doing our best. Sorry if I can't see my own slides. I'm not too sure what I'm supposed to be saying.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so as I was saying, we then became a city which is a friend of children, which is a UNICEF label, and we based all of our activities around three main axes: inclusion, protection, and participation of children. Sorry, it's really hard to do this, says the speaker. So, of course, we have a legal framework for all of this participation. I don't need to tell you all about it, but we've got the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we've got our federal constitution, we've got the Geneva Constitution, and even our municipal bylaws, to a certain extent, have included children participation as a requirement. It's an interesting story, for instance, that the bylaw on parks, it says that all playgrounds must be the subject of a participatory process. But before we start with this big debate, maybe we should step back a moment and talk about why we do this. As a municipal service, it's all very good to say that you want to have participation, but on the ground, in practice, when we try and convince urban planners and architects and police officers what the space of children should be in our communities and how they should be integrated into decision-making processes, it all becomes a lot harder. Sorry, it's really just not going the way I want to. Sometimes it's switching too fast, sometimes it's not fast enough. In any case, we're creating participation in order to strengthen our democracy. What does that mean in practice? Well, we're constantly voting in Switzerland, as you know, on everything. But despite this, like in all other democratic countries at the moment, participation rates in elections is very, very low. And we see that our young people are not uninterested in what goes on in our communities, but they participate differently. They participate through social media, in the debates, exchanges, involvement in associations. So what we want to ensure is that for the very youngest, with children, that's what we work on. This idea of participation, maybe not votes or elections, but talking about how we can become stakeholders and really influence, not just becoming a citizen, but truly being a citizen. We say, okay, you're a child now, but you're going to be a grown-up one day, and you need to learn now how to develop an opinion, listen to other people's views, control where you get your information from, participate. But then, of course, you also have the other side, is how we get the services across from the children to learn how to listen. And that's the big question here, because it's not actually that hard to hear children's views, but it is very hard to have those views listened to. Now, I've said that for us, another major issue at stake. The sound is back, I believe. I think it's working. So then back to this whole question of participation and why we do it. Well, I was saying sometimes it's harder, or we need to really think about making it more utilitarian, like actually useful, practicable. It's important to have projects that come from a participatory process with children, because these are projects that are easier to be accepted. And it's true, when you have conflicts, difficult neighborhoods, when we come with the voice of the children first, it forces the adults to listen up, to really get a better consensus amongst themselves. So it can also be a bit of a lever to get certain projects accepted. Now, another answer to why we do participation is because often the projects that we get through participation are better with the children's views incorporated. We've seen architects, for instance, well-known top architects completely opposed to the idea of children being involved, but then at the end, we all concluded together that actually the project was better thanks to it. Better for everybody, not just the children, but for the whole neighborhood. So, coming back to this presentation now. Now my slides are going backwards, says the speaker. Sorry, says the speaker. So just to say, we've had all different types of projects in Geneva, a lot related to public spaces, playgrounds, schoolyards, but also votes on the choice of a book, for instance, best book chosen by Geneva's children. We also had votes on themes for parties. You know, you all know this scale of participation. Now, at the beginning, we wanted to run it all. We wanted it to be at the top, co-participation, co-work. We wanted to have projects that were very fair. And ultimately, we ended up coming back on how we saw things. And we saw that children, to have a place in our society, they need to be as involved as possible with us in all of our processes. Now, sometimes we're not so ambitious, or we'll vote, or we'll discuss a topic, but other times we have major projects with really high participation levels that are co-built, co-constructed. But ultimately, really what it's about is to have this principle brought on board, to just hear what the children think and then consult as best we can. So now you could say we're less concerned about being at the very top of the scale. What's important for us is that we play around with the different levels of this scale. Now, we did one major study on lunch breaks. Now, you should know, in Geneva, we have school canteens, restaurants serving the schools. That's where the children eat, and it's a bit complicated. There's 3 different partners distributed in many different places, more than 7,500 meals a day. And people weren't happy with the quality of the food. But of course, the city just subsidizes the service, so we couldn't really directly change anything. And we weren't too sure how to make that change. So finally, we said, well, let's listen to the children. What are the children telling us about their lunches? How do they experience these lunch breaks? And then bring that back to the schools, because everybody really had lost track of what service was being provided. So we really needed to bring it back to basics and hear what the children were saying. So we had a major participatory process launched. It was a survey that was built together with the University of the Canton of Vaud to make sure we had a robust process put into place. I'm going to skip that slide, it's too detailed. But the first thing we wanted to do was ensure the participation across age, gender, origin, social background, and such. But we were very concerned about social inequality. That question. Geneva is rather mixed socially. It's quite well done that way, because a lot of work is in order to ensure a balance between different neighborhoods and districts. But despite this, there's still some neighborhoods that are more vulnerable and others that are more well off. And it was important to us to ensure that this survey really covered all of the different neighborhoods. It was really representative. And so we were lucky. We had very specific demographic data on the city structure. And on the basis of that, we were able to balance the choice of schools so that we can make sure there was a proper balance in the data. And then we tested it in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods and then one of the poorest ones. And of course, our researchers worked together with us to help us develop the approach properly. There were 4 different methods followed for the analysis. One, we had the researchers sitting down and eating with the children. I don't know if you've ever done that, I've joined the children in a canteen, but you learn a lot, let me tell you. Parents often complain that the children never tell them how things went at school, but just go and join the kids during their lunch break in the canteen and you'll get a true wealth of information. So that's the first thing we did. The second thing we did was have a questionnaire administered to the children. The older ones filled it out themselves. The younger ones were helped by the older ones or by the researchers, with a maximum number of open-ended questions. The third thing we did, or the third method we chose, was using photos. So we selected photos on a table. They're always presented to small groups of 8 to 10 children at a time. When we were said, what is the lunch break for you? Choose the picture that best represents it. Choose the images that you don't like about your lunch. And then the fourth method were workshops with the children, where the children themselves became the researchers with their classmates, with the assistance and the moderation of the researchers themselves, to help these young researchers do their work with their classmates. And what did we find? Well, I don't need to give you the details, but it was a bit of a shock to see what we got as a result of this. Because what we saw is they were not happy with their lunch breaks. The first photo that everybody chose, really across the board, was the woman shouting at a child. And we really saw that they were loud, noisy, stressful environments with the moderators that were often maybe not the most competent, who spent most of the time shouting at the children. And what the children liked about the time was playing, spend time with their classmates. So this was a bit of a shock to the system. Not going to lie. It's really, the quality of learning after lunch depends on the quality of the time you spend during lunch. And we're really not being that good to our children. So it's about setting up processes and dedicating budget to making it better. That's always going to be hard, but still. Now, I don't need to go into detail, but we spent a lot of time on participatory processes in the schoolyards. I don't know if we'll have time to talk about that, but let me just say, by means of conclusion, if I can get to that slide, is, what did we learn? Participation will lead to political involvement if you can structure it properly. If you haven't got the guidance, then it's really all just whitewashing. You need to have resources dedicated to it. You can't have miracles. Without money, there's no results. And it needs to be led by professionals who are experienced. You need to have dynamic group process to ensure you get the results. Of course, you need to ensure they're age appropriate, that it's voluntary participation. There needs to be a variety of approaches using different media, because otherwise you have children that might be very happy speaking, but then there will be other children who are good expressing themselves, but then there's others who won't be. Then there's going to be your group dynamics, which will bring you other results. And all of that needs to be kept in mind. And of course, we need to make sure that we build it all back. We often forget this, but there's going to be this moment where sometimes we forget, oh, wait, we forgot to tell the children what we're doing in the first place. And that's important. You said it's an ongoing process. Of course you need to have the feedback. You need to always ensure that there's a loop back to them. So that's what I would consider to be most important. There are three main axes on which we plan to work in terms of participation going forward. We have got a big budget for increasing the planting and landscaping in 9 different schoolyards. Also, there's a lot of work in order to convince our urban planners to give space to children in our changing city. It's a bit of a fight, to tell you the truth, because between the whole question of, those who want to build buildings and improve housing and all the other demands to make sure that the children are also on the wish list is hard to do. And then there's also going to be a screen time campaign. The whole question of reducing or banning screen time. We're now in phase 2 of that campaign, where we want to work for and with and of the children and build a campaign together with them about screen time. And that's it from me. Thank you very much. Thank you and good luck. Thank you very much, Isabel. Cass, I don't know if you had any thoughts. Briefly, maybe we are running short on time, but maybe you've got a few words that you'd like to say about this experience. Also picking up on what we heard in the first presentation, the mutual learning, unexpected learning, getting answers that are maybe inconvenient when children tell us that we're not doing things very well. Your thoughts, Cath?
Yeah, really interesting to hear and such beautiful examples of the many ways that you can investigate with children. And the many ways that you can start to bring about change through that dialogue. And it strikes me that you've created an atmosphere, you've created that participatory environment. And I wonder how you've managed to do that, because that's such an achievement that makes everything else grow.
Well, it's maybe not all that pretty in reality. There are 2 things that we did. First, we created a working group, bringing together all of the different city departments. And then that was very important for us because ultimately we ended up saying to all of the municipal departments, you have links with children, when and where, and what can you do to make your project more participatory for children? Now, it's true at the beginning, for instance, for street works, they came back to us and said, oh, we don't have anything with children. But then actually, we had a whole project with them on waste recycling in all of the schools, thanks to this new approach. And we went to the police services, we went to the architects, and we said to them, let's build an action plan together for the entire city where everyone is present. And that was really important.
Thank you. If I can ask one more question. The participatory budgeting, what helps that work?
Well, we had some good years in budgetary terms, but it really does depend. So we have a budget that's earmarked for us of about 200,000 francs in Geneva for specific projects for children. So it's all about getting that money working well for the professionals, but there's lots of different ways to do it. Often teachers are on the front lines. They might be doing things in the classrooms, and so we get that happening. Also in my service, there's more people who are aware of the situation. So if the methods are clear from the outset, then we can get participation, which is not too, quote unquote, expensive. But what can be hard sometimes is that we can't have participation if we don't have the budget to actually implement what's decided, and that's actually harder to get. So sometimes there's some tension there.
I think that art of managing that tension is the biggest thing, and really good to see the reflection at the municipality level about needing the funds for the whole process, including implementation. Thank you. I could ask all day about it, but I know we're tight for time. Hopefully we'll all get to the chance to ask more questions.
Yes, certainly. We'll have more time so that you can all exchange and you can talk about what you heard from the different cities. We can also take from the audience. We'll now be hearing from Lorena from Rivas Vaciamadrid, who's going to be talking to us about what she does and what her experience is.
Hello, good morning. Good morning. Okay. Now it seems to work. Okay, well, thank you ever so much to the network, to Marina Canals, for having invited us and allowed us to be part of this day. And all of those of you who are here, thank you. And those who are beyond the screens, also thank you. Because the diversity of our childhood and youth is one of the main reasons for participation. And at the end of the day, participation cannot depend on your purchasing power. Let me give you a context. We're short of time. Let me briefly tell you, let's see, I come from Rivas. Rivas, as I said before, is part of the autonomous community of Madrid. We're 15 kilometers from the center of Madrid, and our population is about 100,000 inhabitants. We're in the about 23,780, because just presented a diagnosis, and Rivas, all the childhood and youth count, 23,780 are under the age of 18. And 814 kids live in the Cañada area, and we're going to concentrate on that area. Let me tell you that Rivas, when it comes to educational resources, has 8 primary schools, 5 public secondary schools, a private school, just one, and two ones which are so-called agreement schools, which are half private, half public. We have 2 municipal centers of resource centers for children up to the age of 12. One of them you shall see now, which is Dimazanga, which has that name because it was the first union of children. We have a youth center called La Casa Más Grande, the biggest house, which is designed, drawn up by a reference secondary school, the House of Music, also specialized in musical education, managed by one of the user groups. And then we also have urban installations, because participation sometimes is not just to be in a given area and tell adults what we have to do. No, that they should directly decide on the areas they're going to use. Skate park, a calisthenics area, and so on. It takes up all the ideas and interests which the younger population of our municipality. Of the 23,080, 814 boys and girls up to the age of 18 live in the Cañada area, so-called Cañada area. Now, the Cañada Real is a shanty town settlement, one of the biggest in Spain, and affects 3 municipalities in the area: Madrid proper, Rivas Vaciamadrid, and Coslada. And the center you see there in the photograph is the Municipal Center for Childhood Resources. The ground floor is connected with the top one, and it's very fun. We work with kids from 4 months old to 12 years old. The Cañada population also find marginated population, excluded population, who have often live in infra housing, or sometimes with no access to electricity or running water. There's a high social vulnerability because of this kind of infra housing, families with very low revenues, and who have difficulty to make ends meet. And they cannot possibly face up to the school expenses, right? They have no connection to internet. So, and we're very close to Rivas. There are also problems of overcrowding. So emotional welfare of the kids is definitely not the best. And this emotional impact includes stress. We are talking of kids up to the age of 12, stress, a sense of being of stigmatization, and uncertainty. What is going to happen to us? But they also have a strong sense of belonging to their community. That's the upside. The City Council of Rivas, we have both the current mayor and the previous one were teachers, and they understand that participation is a right, an undeniable right of these children. We wish to leave no one behind and ensure, if you like, equitable share out of wealth. Well, the corporation makes itself available to the youngest kids. Urban camps, external ones, cultural activities, sporting activities, lunch, if you like, and meal times, and social accompanying. As we're very close to Rivas, just one street away, we want them to participate, that the participation takes up the whole city, not just this excluded area. So these are photographs of the current photographs of the Cañada, the situation of the Cañada, which is, as I say, a very disadvantaged area. You can see the features we have mentioned about this area. In Rivas, we recognize rights of children and adolescents. Participation is used as a methodology to strengthen social inclusion. And that's what we were talking about. The diversity of all the children and teenagers is not easy. Nobody said it was easy. We're going to talk about strategy. Until what doesn't work and what does. But how does the city build itself? And we look at how the policies of other, if you like, city of the city council implicate themselves with the education. Well, maybe they can't vote, but they certainly have a voice, right, in everything which has to do everything to do which affects them directly. So the situation of children in Rivas is part and parcel of Rivas's DNA, if you like, its identity. There are some initiatives which are based that. We're going to look at some of the projects in a minute. In the skate park, it's an open installation for practicing skateboard, very close to the Cañada. How do we incorporate girls to participate in skating? Because basically it's it's basically boys who participate in skateboard. So the boys would, if you like, steal some of the skates. There's a conflict there. But at the end of the day, we should translate it into a positive living together and ensuring that these kids pick up all the different skates which are no longer used, skateboards, and they call them solidarity skates or solidarity skateboard. And they attempt to ensure that at the end of the day, all can participate. And this place, which was a kind of area where there were fights and where there was conflict, and we, public administration, have to be there and have to know where conflicts can arise and deal with them. So it has now become an area which caters for all the teenagers in the area. Also, when we look at living together in the schools, we must ensure that their actions can be carried out, because when we favor spaces of conversation where listening and dialogue takes place, where these kids from empathy also make others aware of difficulties with language, with the way we express ourselves, different cultures, and we manage to break down some of these stereotypes and prejudices. So it's more human. It's not as, if you like, there's not so many biases that are with the world of adults. And so the schools from Monday to Friday are class finish at 2:20, but we change things so that all the other kids can also participate. We also have outreach services when it comes to dealing with teens in this unprivileged, less privileged area. And there are certain aspects or outcomes of which we are proud. On the 20th of November, in one of the biggest schools in the Cañada, and there's a park opposite, which is now known as the Park of the Rights of Childhood. On the 20th of November every year, there are awareness-raising activities there, and that is something to celebrate. Today, how are we doing for time? In Rivas, there's a participation project. It's a child forum. It's an area where kids and teenagers can, up to 18, we start with a childhood forum, and we ask the mayor to do it, and we also, after that, draw up the youth forum. So it's a school for civic participation. This takes place outside classroom hours. It's free. It's participated. There are 2 or 3 meetings per year in schools right throughout our city. They participate in a voluntary fashion in other events in the city. And here we can see how the kids are participating in other areas of the city, where one of the years you cannot expect kids to participate. You cannot expect us to participate as adults when you don't treat us like children. You treat us like adults with timetables which are all wrong, and you don't take us on board. So one of them, this resources center for children, is next to the Cañada, precisely to favor these excluded kids to come there. We organize meetings with parents. The mayor and the deputy mayor, or the responsible for education, also turn up. And the kids talk about what they're doing and talk about their project so that they can be informed. During the first semester, there is the children work on their rights, and they have projects for the rest of the time year. In the youth forum, they prefer to work on their specific interests. And around these interests, they choose, each group chooses what they want to work on. Last year, they worked on the situation in Palestine, and they drew up an exhibition to take it to all the other schools, and so on. How do we also incorporate in the childhood forum? We incorporate inclusion in population. Well, basically we have 2 targets. One of them, ensure that information trickles down and reaches this population in all the classrooms, and especially in the schools whose intake basically come to the Cañada, this less privileged area. And then we talk about how to bring on the families on board. It's very important because for some of them it is difficult to be online. So the child forum also involved with other stakeholders, social educators, social workers. The Red Cross also discusses with the families. So everything is very personalized and highlighting that it is free at the point of use. Another objective was to facilitate knowledge, or to divulge the project to all and sundry, and also ensure that the kids remained in these projects. COVID, that was a big problem there, and we managed to recover bit by bit, and we also, in the Cañada, which is a number of people in the Cañada who act as educators and who helped us translate what says. We work on participation, autonomy, awareness raising. It is also important that when we draw up the calendar, the timetable, the school which is closer to Cañada, we do things on the Friday, because on Saturday and Sunday they have activities in the religious centers, in the mosques and so on. And when we plan extracurricular activities, we must take on board and take into account what is done, or what La Cañada needs. And last but not least, these are the results and the outcomes, the positive outcomes. to look at in the perspective, keep the childhood perspective and childhood rights perspective, the results are the outcomes of the process I've been telling you about. Also, the informal networks between families and between the family of La Cañada and families from other areas, right? These informal meetings are very valuable because they lead to greater trust, and maybe one mother who has difficulty with the Spanish language will get in touch with another mother, a native mother, who will help them and incorporate them and bring them on board to the whole process and our activities. We also managed to sort of outdoor activities. And these are the mothers, basically, especially mothers who are involved in the sometimes the fathers as well. But about 10 years ago, when you work with a population of the Maghreb, they don't celebrate Christmas, of course. They're because they're Muslim. So via these spaces for dialogue and conversation, we changed the name of Christmas Eve to the lit up night, the night which is illuminated, to be able to bring on board all these communities which are not Christian or Muslim. COVID was a big stumbling block, breaking down stereotypes and stigmatization of the communities. And we need to work, but not all of the children find it easy. It is not easy, of course not. But we want to ensure that at the end of the day, Rivas is a far more humane and friendly city than it is now. Thank you. Thank you ever so much for these very specific examples. The importance that you give to the reference points in the community, create that the communities have people who are bridges, especially in the skateboard area, how you manage to resolve potential conflict there. And it goes, and you manage to ensure participation, which can be extended to other activities. I don't know, Cath, if you have any.
As well, you talked about the creation of a bridge, but it strikes me that it's intergenerational participation that you're doing, so that the mothers particularly are involved, but it's bringing everybody together because it sounds like it needs to feel like this is something that belongs to everybody. So congratulations on achieving that. And I wonder, are there any difficulties that you're still encountering? Because you've achieved so much, but what are the challenges you feel you still need to get over?
Well, we must continue our line of work because the pandemic was a big blow. Participation fell away. The girl population and how they participated in sports activities. Teenagers also, there was another big challenge, how to deal with them. That the spaces of the city should continue with youth and child participation, especially the population that uses the facilities. Because with the skate park, there was a participatory process. They designed it. And to show you where it comes, in Rivas, we arranged some of the football pitches, and one young teenager wrote a letter to the mayor saying, "When are you going to fix the skate park?" And the mayor got in touch with us, and he said, well, we're going to talk to one of these kids. And okay, you want a skate park? Well, you design it. You build it. They did the design. They looked at skate parks in other areas. They carried out research. And at the end of the day, the company which won the bid to carry it out had to take on board the design that the kids had drawn up. And sometimes we forget about that. We must always remember that. Organizing encounters like this, that other departments from the City Council, town planning, must have this cross-cutting take and include the look of
it's
kids.
a real achievement to get that way of thinking about childhood and the way of thinking about children as competent social actors, as citizens now. You know, that's I feel like that's the real theme across what we're hearing here. But also there's the commitment over the long term of that engagement and the building of trust that makes it possible. Does that sound right? And I wonder, you know, as well as those personal relationships, there's across generations. There's something that you talked about in the middle, which was about that way of talking, that way of being alongside, and it reminded me of sitting at the meal times and hearing from children there. You know, how does a worker learn how to be in that way, that they can form those relationships? Because not everybody can do it, or can everybody do it? How does it happen?
Okay, excuse me. Well, we really have to walk the talk, right? We have also been kids and teenagers. We all remember when adults ignored us. And I say we have a wonderful, wonderful team of human resources in Rivas who really believe in the projects. And there is like a knock-on effect, a multiplying sort of virtuous circle, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you. It's the team, isn't it? The team who have the capacity for empathy, you know, but also how we support each other. I think in the challenging times, to deal with them, to come together and actually sometimes not just wait for other people to make the change by asking for the change. It sounds like you're involved in making things change all the time together with the community, you know. So it's this, for me, it's this idea of citizenship, which is about mutuality as well as engagement with the municipality. It's just a way of being together, and I think, you know, that's what cuts across all of this commitment to being together in a way where we all do all the things that we can all of the time to make those little changes that can build into big ones. So thank you.
The question of being emotionally intelligent, right? Because at the end of the day, when adults design or propose, and it's not as successful if we don't take them into account. The previous skateboard was not as good as the one they have now. And we propose activities in the Casa Más Grande, one of the civic centres, but they'll never be as successful as the ones organized by the youth. So let us sometimes trust them and allow ourselves to be taken along board with them. Thank you very much. Yes, doubtless, there's the importance of ensuring that things are authentic and ring true. And we must recognize the capacity of others, despite the post and we adults should have a certain facility because we have a long track record, but sometimes we forget about when we were kids. Now, many ideas and specific examples have turned up. All of those of you who are here have been, and those who are following and streaming, I'm sure you have many, many questions or experiences. So let's start with this question and answer session. We'll listen to the questions that might have come from those of you who are here, or both of those who are here, and then we'll listen to the questions from via Zoom, right, online. So first of all, we'll start with those who are in here in person. And there's another colleague from Rivas, from the city of Rivas. So we do need a roving microphone for the speakers. You can speak in Portuguese, Spanish, French, or English. Hello? I like the idea that you have an environment which favors this participation. And often secondary schools are not exactly spaces which favor participation from children. And my question is, do you also work with teachers to ensure that schools find areas for greater participation in all the various environments within the school? Yes. Let me talk two specifics in Rivas. One is an activity of transforming schoolyards where all the school community appears together with councillors, and that brings together families, non-educational staff, children, and how they would transform their park, right? The park and the yard.
I work in a research centre where we involve lots of projects with schools. One of them was run by my colleague, Deborah Cook. And in that, I think it was such a good example of bringing together the children and the teachers and their parents and community organisations to understand how you could make a school into a participatory space. And I think unless you have everybody on board to do that, it's really difficult, because then you're making children push against a mountain. You're making them responsible for bringing across the change. And also, you're not engaging with the teachers who want to make that possible. You know? So I think very much bringing people together. And in another project right now, I'm working with in a different country with teachers first to understand the issues of poverty that they're experiencing for the children in their schools. And they will help support children to engage in that project in a safe way, so that the children can design what we do as the research. You know. But I think they're really important allies in the process.
Fausto, Isabel, would you want to add something? Yes, teachers are key. We work a lot with them to ensure that we're involved. You've got class councils, you've got school councils. But what's interesting for me is the dynamic and how we get that back. You have to be careful, because there's all of the different partners in the school. You've got the parents, you've got the children, and then you've also got the neighborhoods themselves. So we try and work a lot with the family school and family neighborhood connection, because so much happens around the school. If the speaker could speak into the microphone, if the speaker could speak into the... So the idea is to get the parents more involved and also the neighborhoods more involved. Teachers, yes, they're important, but they're really more like a point of entry than a solution.
In specific, this is the Council of Young People, is one of many activities for young in Turin. Participation with there is many educator to work with people, with young people, with the school, with the family. It's essential. It's essential. It's not election. Ok, bambini, mettetevi in fila. No. No. There is a work like this picture, no? The planning, organization, coinvolgimento, connection with family, with father, Muslim father, mother, in
Yes.
in quartieri, in zone della città, in
barrio, sì,
in barrios,
Yeah.
sorry, ma
In the neighborhoods.
inglese,
Puedes hablar en
spagnolo.
italiano?
You can speak Italian, says the
in
moderator.
barrios, in barrios with many problems, social problems, no? Lili live in Barriera di Milano, barrio multi-ethnic, multicultural, with many problems, no? For young people. But Lily want to be a doctor, and for me this is important.
Shall we take another question?
Hola, bueno, muchas gracias por todas las presentaciones.
Hello, thank you so much for all those very interesting presentations. I work in the public health department of Barcelona, and amongst other things, we work on assessing the impact of different interventions on people's health. Health more than just a lack of illness, but health and wellness, mental health, quality of life. And participation, I'm sure, is a social determinant for health. So I wonder, Cath or maybe others, have you got experiences where the impact of participation has been measured on health of children? And if so, what sort of methodologies might you have used there?
There's a really good example of an evaluation in Australia where they've looked at the impact of participation on well-being, which is quite closely linked to health, really. And they've seen a positive correlation. I think it's the Australian Catholic University team have been involved in it. But also I know that colleagues at the University of Queen's in Belfast are currently doing a review of all of the different research that has been done to understand what are the positive impacts of participation. So I think they will be giving us that evidence really soon. But yes, yeah, there is evidence of that. And how they developed that measure was with children. So children thought about what is it that we think participation is giving us? You know, what difference do we think it is creating in our lives and in our schools? And then they used that tool to evaluate children in different schools. You know. And I think that's the only way that you can do evaluation in a participatory atmosphere. It's by understanding together what it is that you should measure, not by picking off a questionnaire format or survey items that have been created by somebody else. No, what is it in this context, in this barrio, in this school that will show that there has been change? But also in Barcelona, I have, and in other countries, together we developed some indicators around some of the things which are part of the process of achieving change in public health. And some of those are about increased gender awareness, and the provision of more role models around success and access to leisure activities that are suitable for communities themselves. So as well as the outcome evaluations, you can look at what are the things that are part of the process of achieving those outcomes actually in place. And I can share a report with indicators that children have created.
Not sure if Fausto or Isabel would want to add something related to health, this whole question of health impacts. Not, maybe there's more questions or comments, something you might want to ask about, or maybe you want to share a story of your own. We come from very different professional backgrounds here. I don't know if there's maybe a question also in Zoom. No, there's one thing I wanted to ask. We sort of ran short of time earlier, but I wonder what each of you would have to say to the following. The experience, what have you learned from what you've heard around the table today, from the experiences of the others, Fausto, Isabel, that we could hear from each of you? Well, from Fausto, I learned about the intercultural component and the representation of all the different cultures in this parliament. From Isabel, you sort of caught me off guard here, but the question of the canteen, the school canteens, it is a high conflict area after all. A lot of issues that may arise there because that's another form of staff that we need to train and assist. And the whole question of school lunches, I'm going to be taking that with me to Rivas, so thank you for that. Yes, I was sort of imagining the sum of all of your experiences in a single city and what that might look like. It might be very nice to see the guidance that we saw from Isabel, for instance, also what Fausto said, or your own experience with respect to inclusiveness and involving different profiles, it being one of the objectives in Geneva, that the mix really be represented at all levels. Marta's microphone isn't working. Well, one thing I was really impressed by is to see how we share the huge difficulties we face and just how hard we all work. I was really struck by what you said about the social aspect and the multicultural component. I don't know what how many foreign-born citizens you've got in your part, but in Geneva, it's roughly around half the migrant population. So it's a huge factor. So how do you ensure that they have a space for our citizens? It's really more questions that I'm bringing back with me. Also, in Geneva, we really did ask ourselves about this idea of having a children's council or not. We're not entirely convinced by this approach, to tell you the truth. There's always a plan to get there at some point, though. There's the whole question of the representativeness and also the size of the neighborhood. What does a child understand? Do they see life in the size of their neighborhood or the size of the city or the size of their school? How does that transfer to adulthood? It's a question. Now, your example about what you did is really inspiring. So it's really more things that serve an inspiration for us.
The capacity building un paradigma generativo. We start now, we work together in the forest, no? and we get out the forest changed altogether, changed, multicultural, multi-vision, no? Point of view. Il percorso è più importante dell'obiettivo. The way is more important than objective. This is your experience for me.
I think what strikes me listening to all of you is that it's all needed. There's something, there can be something very powerful sometimes about a children's council when it forces adults who are less comfortable with participation to engage with a process which they recognize. And perhaps it's easier for them to step into that than it is for them to step into other places. But it needs the work in the schools, it needs the participatory environment in the whole municipality, and it really needs the work with the most excluded communities and the bridges between all of that for it to be a process in which children are represented in their entirety, you know, and which more of them get access to power and to influence, and that the right things change. You know. So that's why I was so pleased to have all of these examples here on the stage, because it's not like we can just do one thing. We do have to walk through the forest, you know, and learn together on the way of how to do that. And we need to learn from each other about the things that are working, share the challenges, and learn to float, as my nieces tried to teach me, you know. And that's what I hear in this as well. What I hear is that despite the things that are difficult, sometimes it's not possible to have the money for the objective at the end. You know, you've only got the money for the process. But everybody's engaged in finding solutions to that. And it's because I think we're stepping into a heart space, and that's what struck me in what you were talking about. You know, it's a heart space of willingness and hope. That together we can make this a reality, you know? Even where people are telling us it's a myth, you know, actually that's what's here, you know. People are doing this and it's working, and we're learning from each other, and you know, we won't always get it right, you know, but we will move in the right direction, you know. And I was every time that I felt disheartened by in the process of participation that I was involved in, somebody kept saying to me, remember Martin Luther King? He talked about you're trying to nudge the arc of history into the right direction. It's not all on your shoulders. You know, we're all doing this together. And I think it feels different. It feels different coming now to the last time I was in Barcelona talking about this in 2007. You know, things are shifting. You know? Maybe not as fast as we would want, but we're moving that arc of history in the right direction. So thank you for all of your examples of practice.
Muchas gracias, Cath, por estas reflexiones, ¿no? Que creo que...
Thank you very much, Cath, for those reflections. I think they do explain very well the various ideas that have been expressed. The need to learn to float. You talked about this in your introductory remarks. This need for us to recognize each other, to take each other into account, to get each other involved from our own respective positions and roles, so that the participation of children is something that is built by people, but which also builds our future. So thank you to all of you. Cath, Fausto, Isabel, Lorena, and now perhaps you can leave the front stage and we'll continue with the last part of the session. Well, you'll have the opportunity to continue your chatting over the course of the day because a lot of topics have really come up. There's so much to talk about. Now, Cath has said it. She was in Barcelona not too long ago, more than a decade ago. Things have changed. Things have progressed. But we still have challenges to face. So to wrap up, go ahead, Cath. So to wrap up this morning's session, the first part of today, I'm going to ask Pilar Leonard to come to the front here. She's head of the Department of Educational Programs and Educational Directorate here at the Barcelona City Council, part of the team that has made today's event possible.
Hola, bon dia. Ens posem tot a l'equip perquè això ha estat un projecte coral, com hem dit. Ai, perdón, nos ponemos todo el equipo porque esto es un proyecto coral desde el principio al final.
If I could ask the entire team to come forward, please.
Yo voy a tomar la palabra, pero podéis complementar.
It was
bueno, hemos querido hacer esta
everybody
foto,
who's
¿no?
involved. So I'll say a few words, but feel free to add it. I just wanted to get this snapshot taken, speaking of participation, showing you that all the people who've worked together. So just a few words from me then. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to everyone who's here in the room, and also a big welcome to our colleagues from the International Association of Educating Cities. It's been a real pleasure to work together with Marina Canals and her team because they've made this international connection possible. So hello to everyone. Just wave hi to the people behind the camera. Let me just introduce the team that's been behind the scenes running the show. Marina Canals, Maria Angels, who are the head of the International Association of Educating Cities, also Carlos Gil. Gloria, where are you? Come on up front, Gloria. We want you up here too. Gloria Martinez, they're from the Directorate of Childhood, Youth and Senior Citizens. We also have Elisenda Ortega from the Directorate for Participation and Democratic Innovation. I hope I got your name right. Maria Mestra and Judith Bayers of the Education Directorate of the Barcelona City Council. And also, just to say there are people here in the audience who've been helping make it happen. Ana Novella from the University of Barcelona. Please wave your hand. Beside her is Laia Arasarus, who's her PhD student. She'll be working in this afternoon. She's been bridging with the CAP because she's doing her PhD with Cath, who's been helping her out as her advisor. I don't want to leave anybody out here. We also have the Institute of Childhood and Adolescence, Cayano Mortes, who suggested that Cath Larkins be our keynote today. So if you're here, it's because of their recommendation. Also, again, not to leave anybody out, we have the Public Health Agency, a lot of familiar faces here. We've been working with you as well a lot. The Canódromo, that's our venue, the Greyhound track, which we've got our technician here who's been facilitating our work here in this space. Now, this day on the International Day of the Educating City would not have been possible without the work of everybody behind the scenes. We believe that the Educating City is built like this. We wanted to design this day with a before, a during, and an after, because it doesn't end here. It has to continue. Education is an ongoing process. There are different directorates and departments of the Barcelona City Council who have come together with our dreams and our plans, and here dreams is important. And this has led to a true expression of what the Educating City means, to build together, listen to each other, recognize each other as part of a shared project. We also like to highlight the inspiration that we got from Cath Larkins, who will continue to be doing so. She'll be joining us this afternoon. You're all invited to stick around for the afternoon event. She's an excellent communicator. She's shared also we heard valuable experiences from Turin, Geneva, Rivas Vaciamadrid. So thank you to Fausto, Isabel, and Lorena for that. You've opened our eyes, you've opened up windows to new horizons for us. We'd also like to thank, you may not see them here today, but if you stick around for the afternoon, you will see them, the group of children, boys and girls from the Grupo Motor. So this is from the Barcelona City Children's Group. Sorry, I hope I can get the name right. So they'll be joining us to remind us that children are citizens in their own right. I'm not telling you anything new. They have their own voice. They have their own ability to participate actively in the city. Listening to them is not just a symbolic gesture. It is absolutely essential to build an educating city that is built with them and for them and thanks to them. So their participation should promote participation and inclusion of all types of childhood. And that's what we're trying to do in our city. So the team behind all this, those of you at the front, hope that you brought some lessons and experiences with you from today, that you will leave inspired with new ideas and a desire to keep transforming your spaces. And if that's what you've done, then we'll have met our goal of strengthening participation and making each of you into a multiplier for a city that is more fair, just, inclusive for everybody. As Lorena said, let's hear for more illuminated nights for all of us. Thanks to all of you here in the room, all of you joining online. Thank you so much. And we will hear again in a moment from Marta to explain what comes next.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias. Bueno, tenemos la música de fondo que ya nos indica que nos vamos yendo, ¿de acuerdo? Muchas gracias, Pilar y Leonard, a ti.
So that's the music in the background to say that it's over. Thank you very much to everybody, to all the team. We said at the beginning, you can't have a day such as this without the participation and involvement of everybody. Thank you to everybody who's joined us online on Zoom. Thanks to our interpreters who helped you follow and made this day as international as possible. We will be wrapping up the Zoom connection now. Thank you for joining us for this first part of today.
We'll ask you to do a group photograph. And the photographer will come up here, so please do come up here for a group photograph. Also tell you while you are coming up that there is a little, sort of finger food out there. And at 4 o'clock we'll open our afternoon session. At 4:15 we'll kick off. Please do return your headsets. Thanks to all the participants online and in person. That's all. Thank you.